Have you ever waited weeks for a network connection? You don't have to. With Megaport, you can spin up connections in minutes, scale bandwidth on demand, and extend your network to over 930 data centers and 280 clouds worldwide. No more waiting, no more contracts, and no more fixed bandwidth limits. Just a private, high-speed network that gives you total control over how you connect. And here's the best part. You can try Megaport for free. Packet Pushers listeners can get a port or a Megaport cloud router completely free for the first month to experience how quickly and seamlessly you can interconnect data centers and clouds and scale networks across regions. Go to megaport.com/trymegaport and start deploying scalable connectivity in minutes, not months. That's megaport.com/trymegaport. Terms and conditions apply.
Take a network break. I'm Jonna Johnson.
And I'm John Burke.
Help yourself to a virtual donut while we blaze through this week's tech news. Today, we're going to be talking about managing configuration drift. I love that phrase in complex networks, seeing the light in data centers, the Starlink competitor from Amazon, and more. But first, if you like Network Break, please check out our other podcasts, including Day 2 DevOps, Heavy Networking, IPv6 Buzz, Network Automation Nerds, and Packet Protector. Get nerdy tech analysis and compelling conversations about infrastructure, cloud, professional development, and more. You can find them all at packetpushers.net.
And stay tuned after the news for a sponsored Tech Bites broadcast, where we get a look at the inner workings of the Wireshark Foundation. Wireshark is a free, open source, and widely used tool for packet and protocol analysis. What does it take to keep Wireshark running, to update software and add new features, to support developers and documentation and the infrastructure that makes Wireshark available to you at the click of a button? We talk with Wireshark creator and lead developer Gerald Combs about the work of the foundation. And let's dive in with the Red Alert this week. The Red Alert is about a sandbox jailbreak in Firefox, which has been discovered and patched just in the last week. Of the more than 1,250 CVEs that were added or updated in the past week, 443 were deemed critical, having a CVSS score of 9.5 or higher, and 20 got that perfect 10. Prominent among the 10s this week, CVE 2025-2857, a sandbox jailbreak affecting Firefox on Windows. Firefox developers noticed this problem themselves in their own interprocess communication codebase as a result of the discovery a few weeks ago of a similar problem in Chrome. That was CVE 2025-2783. That Chrome vulnerability was already being exploited in the wild, and Firefox folks jumped right on theirs. The vulnerability arises when a compromised child process running in the sandbox causes its parent process to return an unintentionally powerful process handle that gives the compromisers access to resources outside the sandbox. There were no reported exploits by the time they discovered this and released a patch. The vulnerability affects Firefox versions before 136.0.4. So the mitigation is update now.
That was pretty clever of them to go back and look at their own browser when they realized it was there.
Right.
In slightly brighter news, the fifth NIST quantum-resistant algorithm is released. As you may recall, last year NIST published a post-quantum or quantum-resistant set of encryption standards based on an algorithm called ML-Chem. This month, it released a new algorithm called HQC to serve as a backup in case the math behind ML-Chem, something called structured lattices, is someday cracked. So this is number 5 out of the ones that NIST has released thus far. HQC is based on a different mathematical foundation, quasi-cyclic codes, and draws on existing error correction coding techniques. NIST said it would be resistant to attacks that succeed against ML-Chem and vice versa. Both algorithms are designed to protect data at rest as well as data in motion. I would say the actionable for IT folks is, quite frankly, exactly what it was before this announcement, which is go look at your infrastructure, see where you're using encryption that puts anything sensitive at risk, and put in place a plan to migrate to these NIST quantum-resistant algorithms. John, your thoughts?
Just that they should keep their eyes on both branches of the math tree here, because it's possible that they're already in something they're doing in their organization, making use of the kinds of math that would make this new method, this fifth algorithm, more practical for them in their applications than the 4 previously released. And yes, I do keep thinking about that movie, The Fifth Element. So special effects
fifth
extravaganzas to follow.
there you go. The fifth quantum resistant algorithm, or the fifth element.
So a few weeks back, this program reported on a supply chain attack channel that was discovered by security researchers where they hijacked old URLs that were associated with Amazon S3 units and found out that all sorts of software was still reaching out for updates on those storage URLs. Well, this week, a URL update broke automatic updates on VMware Workstation. Broadcom redirected a key URL, and things went to Hades. According to VMware Workstation users, on March 24th, the application's automatic update functionality broke when Broadcom redirected a critical download URL. It now points to Broadcom's generic support page. When the auto update hits that page, it throws a certificate error and fails. The same thing happens when users trigger the update process by hand. The only path to updates that is still working currently is to manually go to the Broadcom site, look for updates that apply to the products you run, download them, and install them manually. If the redirect was intentional, it and the resultant manual-only update process were not announced to Workstation users prior to the change. And apparently the same thing happened to VMware Fusion users, but they at least got some kind of announcement, maybe after the fact, in the online community for Fusion.
So basically, the call to action here is if you're using VMware Workstation, go locate the updates and install them manually. But gosh, I mean, I know a couple weeks ago we were talking about VM Workstation update errors again. And John, it just seems like these things are happening a lot lately. Also, Cloudflare had a screw up with updates that we talked about last week. Is there some kind of trend here that major vendors are just screwing up their update process, or are hackers suddenly zeroing in on the update process of major vendors? Like, what's going on here?
Well, I don't want to overgeneralize from what Broadcom has done to its users because
yeah, that's true.
you know, they're going through a rough patch, let's put it that way, as they transition the VMware community into their own. I think the big takeaway for folks in IT shops is to not expect your vendors to be communicative in advance about major changes to their software updating policies or practices, and so be in the habit of checking up on them on a regular basis just to make sure your expectations are still being met.
That's fine if the assumption is Broadcom was making some stupid change to its process and just forgot to tell its customers. But in a lot of cases, these are actually vulnerabilities getting exploited and incipient attacks happening. And that's what I'm kind of zeroing in on is, you know, I mean, just to give sort of an example, insurance companies have suddenly realized that deepfakes are so deep that for 10 years, the process for filing certain claims was take a picture of whatever happened, send it in, and you'll get your claim filed. Now they're suddenly reverting to highly manual processes like sending people out to take photographs because the deepfakes have gotten so darn good that there's no way to test. And I'm just wondering if there's something similar going on here where vendors are retreating back to manual because the hackers have gotten so good at hijacking automatic updates.
Given that a sufficient number of them are URL based like this,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you might be onto something, because between the supply chain attack method that I alluded to earlier and what we know are ongoing DNS hijacking attacks that redirect things by changing what name is returned when somebody looks up a URL, it could be, but if it is, it's incumbent upon the vendors to say something to their customers about the fact that they're making these changes and why. And I think people would be pretty accepting if they said, we can no longer guarantee the safety of the update process, except if you do this. It's like, you know, if somebody calls you and asks for your credit card number, you don't give them your credit card number, even if you think it's coming from the phone number it should be coming from. you go and call the number that you know is right and then consider giving them your credit card number. And it may be a similar thing happening in this space. That's a really interesting thought. But again, I'll say, vendors, it's on you to talk about why you're doing these things if you're doing them intentionally. And of course, I assume that you're not. And so, step up your game.
Yeah, exactly.
Follow that checklist. Make sure you're doing things you're supposed to do in the order you're supposed to do them in.
That sounds good, John. Well, in more cheerful news, NetBox has released Assurance, which is a configuration drift detection tool. The good folks behind NetBox Labs have released a new product, NetBox Assurance, to help network teams detect and fix configuration drift in complex multi-vendor networks. Drift happens, and I do love the word drift. Drift happens when network staff misconfigure a box or restore an incorrect configuration to one, or automation changes settings from what is documented as the intended values as documented in NetBox. NetBox Assurance compares a network device's intended configuration with its actual configuration state continuously in real time and flagging differences to operators in real time or near real time. The tool is meant to help network teams shift from reactive processes to emergent degradation or interruption of services to proactive prevention of them. In other words, if you already know that your devices are misconfigured, you can go and do something before they cause trouble. And in fact, I'm just realizing that quite a lot of what we've been talking about today and in previous episodes has to do with intentional or unintentional misconfiguration. So it's nice to know that at least one vendor is keeping an eye on that.
Oh yeah, anything that will in near real time tell you about these important network and security events, because any kind of drift from expectation is important. It should be hugely useful from a risk mitigation perspective, performance risk and security risk. And it will provide a wealth of teachable moments to the network staff. The folks who get flagged can talk to the folks who made the changes without documenting them in advance about not doing that. That's bad.
Or if the device suddenly reverts to the wrong configuration, we may be in one of those situations we just talked about where it's the vendor's fault. And that could be interesting too. So all good. I'd also point out there's roughly 30,000 NetBox users out there. So if you're a NetBox user, have a look at Assurance, see if it makes sense for you. And also, John, you and I recently did an episode with the good folks at NetOS, which does plugins on top of NetBox. So again, interesting stuff happening in this space is kind of the way I'd put it.
Absolutely.
Let's take a quick break to hear a message from sponsor Megaport. If you're managing enterprise networks across multiple data centers and regions, you know the struggle. Long provisioning times, rigid contracts, and unpredictable costs that make scaling a nightmare. That's where Megaport changes the game. With Megaport's software-defined network, you can deploy on-demand private connectivity in 60 seconds. Connect instantly to over 930 data centers and 280 clouds all over the world with just a few clicks. No waiting months for circuits, no dealing with telcos, just secure, scalable interconnectivity. And here's the best part. You can start for free. Packet Pushers listeners can get a port or a Megaport cloud router completely free for the first month to experience how quick and easy it is to interconnect data centers and clouds and scale networks across regions without long-term commitments or hardware dependencies. Getting started is simple. Just go to megaport.com/trymegaport and start deploying scalable connectivity in minutes, not months. That's megaport.com/trymegaport, all one word. And now, back to the podcast.
Okay. Well, now we're moving on to some of the most memorable announcements from the Optical Fiber Conference that just wrapped up in San Francisco. John, you want to kick it off with our first optical announcement?
Sure thing. We're talking about Lightmatter's Passage M1000 substrate for interposer, that's what they call it, for connecting chips with light instead of electricity. We've talked a lot in this show, or you and Drew have talked a lot in this show in past weeks about co-packaged optics and the way that they're bringing optical networking right to the CPU level or the GPU level inside computing architectures. And now California startup Lightmatter has announced that it's taking another significant step in the direction of using optics inside the chassis of computers to speed things up, to speed up the interconnections between different components, memory, CPU, etc. Its optical interposer is a thing that you plug other chips into, and they use the interposer to talk to each other. The approach is at very short distances, in the millimeter range, to continue to use electrical communications, because at those distances they're fast enough. But at larger distances, the centimeter range, and yes, we're talking about centimeters as long distances, it's using optical transmissions. It has waveguides, and in those waveguides does wave division multiplexing to get 856 gigabit per second optical channels into each waveguide. So a maximum of 448 gigabits per second per waveguide. And if my math is right, about 4 times the standard interconnect speeds that you can get with PCIe 6. And so on par with the upcoming draft standard speeds in PCIe 7. It allows up to 256 fiber connectors at the edge of the interposer that can take traffic to other systems, and there it can achieve up to 448 gigabits per second as well. It's in sampling with partners now, so systems designers are working on building boxes that use these to connect their chips together, and systems are expected out within the year in production.
So, John, this is a great strategy. It's like, here's our interposer that we plug in between chips to speed up the communication, as I understand it. It's almost like kind of a hybrid engine that says, well, we'll use electricity when it makes sense and we'll use gasoline when it makes sense.
Exactly.
But if the four times speed up is on par with PCIe 7, why wouldn't anyone just wait and use PCIe 7?
Well, waiting is not a big thing in AI data centers, you may have noticed. But
True.
also,
Excellent
it's still
point.
just a draft standard at this point. It's in version 0.9 as of last month, and the actual finished standard is not expected until, quote, sometime later this year, unquote.
So basically, if you want that speed up now, your options, or within the year, your options are to consider something like what Lightmatter is offering, or you can wait until the standard is finalized and then the products come out, which can be a matter of several more years, typically, if it meets the usual standards process.
Indeed.
Okay, well, moving along in the theme of light in the data centers, or data centers seeing the light, Corning also wants AI data centers to see the light. They have launched the Glassworks AI Solutions Group. Glassworks AI offers products and services with the aim of replacing copper cabling in the data center with fiber optics. What I think is cool about this is the offerings include something called contour flow fiber, which almost sounds like women's clothing, but okay. Contour flow fibers are 40% smaller than existing fibers, but have better bend resilience. I do love that term. And so are better able to squeeze into tight data center rack spaces and cable runs. Starting with changes in the fibers and the higher density cables they facilitate, and including changes in connectors and other components, Corning claims that a data center designer could get 36 times as many fiber connections into a rack unit as it could with previous tech. This is my favorite kind of announcement, because basically AI GPUs need connectivity density, and the new cables increase density because they're smaller and bendier. How cool is that? Any thoughts, John?
It's just making analogies between data center networking and gymnastics very appropriate right now. Smaller and bendier wins the race.
There you go. There you go. Well, one last item on the theme of optics in the data center. Lumentum optical circuit switch claims a huge power reduction for AI data center networks. So certainly speed and bendiness are important, but power consumption, minimizing power consumption, is also important. Optical photonics company Lumentum Holdings announced pre-release samplings of its R300 optical circuit switch, OCS, a 300 by 300 port product underway at multiple hyperscalers. General availability release is planned for the second half of the year. Lumentum says, here's the kicker, Lumentum says that the R300 can reduce an AI data center's network power consumption by 65% or more, I love their or more, compared to InfiniBand or Ethernet, at least for large-scale deployments on the order of 100,000 GPUs. So 65% is a huge reduction. Basically, the premise here is if you switch to optical switching, from electronic switching, whether it's Ethernet or InfiniBand, you save quite a lot in power consumption. John, they stress that this is applicable largely for large-scale deployments. Do you see any applicability for enterprise data centers, or is this mostly for hyperscalers for now?
I think it's going to be at the very high end of the enterprise, but I think it doesn't have to be, people don't have to think of it as restricted to AI data centers because uh, several industries running high performance computing generally is still a part of the mix in their own data centers, whether it's oil companies or high-end materials companies or even biopharmaceutical companies. They're doing non-AI high performance computing all the time. This kind of interconnect could benefit them and help them make their existing data centers go further or run cheaper or run cooler, all of which can be, laudable goals for anybody.
So basically, if you are running any kind of a high-end data center, there are a handful of announcements here that are of interest, and you can also just look at some of the other announcements that came out in that conference. Moving along, John, I think you've got an announcement on Gmail, and then we can move to space networking.
Space. Okay, on the 21st anniversary of Gmail's launch, which was April 1st, Google announced significant improvements to encryption for Gmail and specifically end-to-end encryption for Gmail. The changes include allowing off Google storage of keys, allowing ad hoc or by default encryption at both the individual and the domain level, and integration with existing S/MIME-based email encryption. Also, and this was a really important extension for them, a guest mode that allows you to send encrypted email and end encrypted email to people outside the Gmail universe without losing the end-to-end encryption. And it works the way other people's encrypted email products worked in the past. It sends a link to folks outside the system that gets them into a little guest session inside the system to read and reply to the messages. So underscoring that it is end-to-end encryption, if you keep your keys outside Google, messages can be encrypted in a way that Google can't read before they get sent to Google Cloud, and the cloud will retain only the fully encrypted data.
Okay, so basically the message here is if you don't happen to be a terrorist or international criminal, you may be quite interested nonetheless in encryption in order to meet requirements like data sovereignty, laws like HIPAA, and export controls affecting content. So this is definitely a welcome announcement from Google. What does anyone have to do? What do IT folks have to do if they want to take advantage of this? Do they need to upgrade Gmail, request it, pay more? How does you?
Right now, it is available as a beta feature for business users and will move into full production later in the year. It's been available as a beta feature for some of the higher end plans since sometime last year, but it's moving into general release over the course of this year now. So look in your configuration consoles and see where the options are. Turn them on if you want them.
Okay, sounds good. And
But
yes.
do this responsibly. If you're going to use keys outside Google, have a solid key management process in place. If you remember the whole thing, I think it was last week with Cloudflare's front end not being able to talk to its back end because of credential failures. Yeah, don't let that happen to you.
Don't do that, yes. Okay, well, wrapping everything up with some space networking, Amazon's Starlink competitor Project Kuiper, I think it's Kuiper.
Kuiper, I think.
Kuiper. That's right, it's Kuiper, is getting launched, literally. They are supposedly sending their first full batch of satellites to space with a launch scheduled for no earlier than noon Eastern on Wednesday, April 9th. The launch is coming roughly a year behind the project's original schedule. Those of us who remembered last year were disappointed it didn't go out. The satellites will travel to space in a United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket lifting off from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. So all you Floridians, you're going to get an eyeful and orbit at an altitude of 450 kilometers. That's 280 miles. Amazon calls this mission Kuiper Atlas 1 an important step in getting its low Earth orbit satellite broadband network built and into service. Its plans currently call for more than 3,200 satellites and more than 80 further launches utilizing United Launch Alliance, Arianespace, Blue Origin, and even SpaceX rockets to get them into space. The current FCC license requires that it gets half the satellites deployed in the next 15 months or so by July 2026. So basically, the sky is going to get a whole lot brighter. As I've pointed out a couple times on the show, we have absolutely hockey stick increased the number of satellites over the past 5 years from something like 2,000 to over 20,000. And this is just going to boost the number even more. So when you're looking up in that starry sky and going, wow, there's a lot of stars out there, some of them are going to be satellites.
And I'm just going to also point out that there's going to be a lot more space junk falling to Earth. So keep your eyes on the skies. Shooting stars are coming.
Shooting stars are coming, carry an umbrella. Not that that would actually help. Okay, John, where should folks go if they want to get more from you?
LinkedIn is the place I live.
Okay, and I am there as well. And thanks again to the good folks at Wireshark Foundation, and look forward to talking to you all next week. Again, if you have questions, feedback, hit us up at packetpushers.net/FU. Don't forget, we've got merch, a dozen podcasts you can subscribe to, an industry blog, 2 weekly newsletters, a community Slack group, a YouTube channel, an IRC group, and more. Find everything at packetpushers.net, and it's all free with no login required.
Today on the Tech Bytes podcast, we get a look at the inner workings of the Wireshark Foundation. Now, many of our listeners will have heard of Wireshark. It's a free, open source, and widely used tool for packet and protocol analysis. In fact, it's one of those tools that's probably been around for much of your own networking career. But what does it take to keep Wireshark running, to update software, add new features, and support developers and documentation, and the infrastructure that makes Wireshark available to you at the click of a button? We talk with Wireshark creator and lead developer Gerald Combs about the Wireshark Foundation. Gerald, welcome to the podcast. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm sure most of our listeners are familiar with Wireshark, but can you give us just a very quick overview of what it is, what it does, and its place in sort of the networking community?
Sure. Wireshark is a desktop application, and its job is to show you as much as it can about every packet that you give it. And it basically takes all this, information that normally flows over a network that's, this kind of bits and bytes that flow back and forth, and present that in a way that humans can understand and work with on the application level. Kind of beyond that, it's this kind of blob of code that's over 6 million lines of code now that has been developed by 2,500 developers, somewhere in that range, and it's downloaded by, at least on the servers that we manage for the macOS and Windows installers, about 1.5 million. I say 1.5 million downloads a month. I don't know how many people that translates to, but wow. And I don't know how many people use it on Linux, but I'm sure the number's kind of in line with that.
Now, I've been using Wireshark since it was Ethereal, and it replaced my very expensive Network General sniffer we had sitting in the corner that was a dedicated piece of hardware. All of a sudden, I was liberated and able to use this packet capture and protocol analysis tool. And it was free. It was magic, right? Is the way it seemed at the time. But over time, Wireshark's evolved to be supported by or overseen, I guess, by the Wireshark Foundation, which was something I found out really recently chatting with you, Gerald. Could you explain what the foundation's role is in maintaining Wireshark?
Sure. I mean, the Wireshark's mission is to help people learn about networking. And the main way it does that is to support the development of Wireshark and pay for our bills for our infrastructure, but also to teach people how to use Wireshark more effectively. And we do that a number of ways. We work with educators and instructors to help teach Wireshark, but we also host a conference that we have twice a year, one in the US and one in Europe, called SharkFest. And we invite people in. We have a bunch of speakers, and they talk about using Wireshark in different ways and analyzing networks and things along that line.
So that all comes under the Wireshark Foundation, both the code development for the platform, and then also the conference. SharkFest is all part of what the Wireshark Foundation is delivering to the community.
Yeah. Having said that, it sounds like we're this big thing, but we have one full-time employee and one part-time. We don't pay any Wireshark developers. The foundation doesn't. I work for a company called Sysdig during the day. All the other core developers work at different companies, and they contribute their code. The instructors, of course, contribute their time. We, have different arrangements for different instructors, but that's basically it.
So when I say Wireshark Foundation, people might be imagining, there's some beautiful building somewhere with, glass offices and people running around. That's not the case. This sounds a little bit more, I don't want to say shoestring, that sounds pejorative, but it's humble, it's modest.
Exactly. Yeah. Along with that, it's really beneficial to the project to have a legal entity, and that's basically the role the foundation serves,
Okay.
not only for helping people learn about networking, but when I talked about downloading Wireshark for Windows and Mac OS, when you download it, those installers are signed, and they're signed by the Wireshark Foundation. And in order to get that code signing certificate from Apple, you need to be an entity that's legal, and the foundation serves different roles like that as well. And yeah, that sort of thing, I guess, sounds minor, but it's actually, I think, an important thing, and it does help people to use Wireshark. And when you download Wireshark and have that signing certificate, your OS doesn't complain at you, which removes a barrier to entry to installing it, which is actually a pretty significant thing.
When you decided to set up a foundation around Wireshark, obviously there's the Linux Foundation, which oversees millions of, they got a huge portfolio of open source projects. Did you think about going under the umbrella of an existing foundation, or why did you decide to set up Wireshark Foundation as its own entity?
We looked at 4 options. When you run an open source project, you need bits of infrastructure, and at a very basic level, nowadays there are companies like GitHub and GitLab and different services like that that'll take care of your coding infrastructure, meaning that you can organize your code and get it built and managed and things like that. And they do a great job. GitHub and GitLab have been these immense boons to the open source development. I can't understate how effective they've been at that. But if you use GitHub or GitLab, one of the things you might notice, or at least I notice, is that they don't, they have a analyze my code button or, approve this pull request button, but they don't have a connect me to a lawyer button. And and once your project grows to that state where you might have to sign some sort of legal agreement, or you might have a trademark that you need to manage, or a conference you need to manage, that's kind of beyond the capabilities of GitHub and GitLab. And so you need some sort of business model, for lack of a better term. But well, I guess that's probably the most accurate thing. And there are different umbrella organizations that can help with that, like the Linux Foundation or the Software Freedom Conservancy. We did actually talk to both organizations, and they're great. But when it came down to decide which way to actually go, in our particular case, we already had this team that manages a conference for us. And so we kind of built a legal structure around that. Initially, which made the most sense for us. If you do have an open source project that's kind of growing and getting big, and you're looking at an umbrella, I do recommend taking a look at Linux Foundation and Software Freedom Conservancy, because the people we talked to were just absolutely great.
And Wireshark used to have a corporate backer, right? I remember you being at Riverbed for quite a while, Gerald, and I think my memory is that Riverbed was a corporate backer of Wireshark and kind of let you do your thing while you were working there. But I guess that's not what's going on now, right?
That's correct. Prior to the foundation, and this kind of goes back to the ease of not having a business model. Prior to the foundation, the primary sponsor of the project was whoever I worked for at the time. That started out with a company called Network Integration Services, then Case Technologies, then Riverbed, and then Sysdig, who helped us actually move to the foundation. And each of those corporate sponsors were great, and I'm very grateful to them for the support they gave. But at the same time, having things structured like that means that we have 2 single points of failure. We have a single point of failure with me because I was the only one working at each company that was really directly involved with the project. And so if I had to step away for whatever reason, we'd have this leadership gap that needed to be filled. And the corporation itself was our primary sponsor. And if they decided to change direction or got acquired or something bad happened at that level, then suddenly we'd be looking for another primary sponsor. And so having the foundation in place fills those gaps and removes those single points of failure, meaning that if I need to step away I don't have any plans to do this, but if I needed to, I can be rest assured that we have this leadership team in place that can carry on and keep doing what we're doing. And the same with our sponsors. We have multiple sponsors now of the foundation. So we have these multiple funding sources that can keep the project going and keep the foundation going.
Yeah, the foundation provides like an entity for Wireshark to continue to exist outside of the individuals right now who are currently keeping it going, essentially.
Yeah, when you say it like that, it sounds like an elaborate ruse to help me sleep better at night. But that's maybe what it is. I don't know.
Okay, but with the corporate backer, I mean, it was pretty easy to understand how the bills were getting paid. The Wireshark Foundation is not a revenue generating entity. You still have sponsors. You still need to generate. How are the bills getting paid, Gerald? That's what I want to know.
Right now, we do that through a number of ways. One, we have corporate memberships. We have all these different corporations that are sponsoring the project at different levels. I mean, one of the kind of standard things to do when you have a nonprofit like this, and by the way, we are a 501c3 nonprofit, and that 501c3 means we conform to a specific portion of the U.S. tax code. And when you give money to us, it's tax deductible, which is, at least in the US, which is great. Kind of the standard thing to do when you do this is to set up these different tiers of sponsorship and these different ways that people can sponsor the project. And that's kind of what we have in place and what we're evolving over time. If you're a big corporation and you have all these engineers using Wireshark and you love us that much that you want to give us money, we have a sponsorship model for that. If you are a vendor in the networking space and you want to get in front of our users at SharkFest and kind of interact with them, we have a sponsorship model for that as well. And we're looking at kind of extending that. If you maybe don't fit into either of those, but you still want to be involved with the project, I encourage you to get a hold of the foundation, and we'll have contact info for that. But that's one of the things we're focusing on. Sorry, go ahead.
More to the point, I mean, you need more sponsors. You have some sponsors. There's some dollars coming through the door of the Wireshark Foundation, but the Wireshark project could benefit from more, correct?
Oh, absolutely. We are bringing in just enough money to keep the lights on and to run our conference. But if we had more money, we could take on other initiatives like better educational initiatives. We could maybe even sponsor development for a specific area of Wireshark, a specific feature you wanted to add or something that we could do. One of the questions that came up with one of our sponsors was, "Hey, you ever thought about rewriting Wireshark in Rust?" And no, it's a valid question, and it's something that other projects are doing and other companies are doing with their code bases, because Rust is this memory safe language. It's kind of in many ways it's the future, but at the same time, trying to do that with Wireshark is not a trivial thing, and you would have to dedicate at least one engineer, maybe more engineers, to do that. And so that'd be a major project and require major funding.
Are there ways for individuals to then interact with or support the foundation?
Sure. I mean, we have if you go to the Wireshark.org website, we have a donate button. You can go, and if you want to make an individual donation, and we certainly welcome that. Thing that I say occasionally is if Wireshark has saved your rear end, then maybe it would be a good thing to maybe donate just because of that. But or if you just love Wireshark. But individuals can donate. But at the same time, if we have recurring revenue that we know is coming in the door, it helps us to plan effectively and plan initiatives within the foundation.
That makes sense, which is why I guess that sponsorship is probably more preferred, because you can make more plans around that kind of money.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier, if you had more resources, you could do more things. But the foundation actually is doing new things. Like recently, you announced StrataShark. Can you tell us what that is and what relationship it has, if any, to Wireshark?
Sure. StrataShark is related to my day job at Sysdig. Sysdig is a company that focuses on securing cloud environments. And they have an open source project called Falco, which acts a lot like an IDS, but it runs on top of your Linux machine. And instead of looking at network packets, it looks at system calls. So at the host level, the application level, it says, okay, this application here is reading from your Etsy directory, or maybe writing to your Etsy directory. On a Linux system or Unix system, that's maybe not a good thing. And so it'll trigger an alarm, and you can then go investigate that. StrataShark is a complementary application for that, similar to how Wireshark might complement an IDS in the networking world. And StrataShark will take all these system calls that are logged out by Falco or there's a command line tool called Sysdig, which is the same name as the employer, but it'll take these system call capture files and load them in, and you can look at system calls much of the way you can look at network packets and analyze them effectively and filter them and do other things, much as you would with Wireshark.
So do you imagine sort of you're a network engineer using StrataShark the way they would use Wireshark, or is this for, maybe more like security operators, threat hunters, that kind of thing?
Primarily the latter, but I consider myself a network engineer, at least I was in past life, and I still find this interesting and fascinating, being able to pull the same sort of event time series data out of my OS's kernel similarly way that I can pull packets off the network and analyze them. I love working at that same low level. And I think within, say, a larger enterprise, if you have different teams that focus on the network and on the systems, now with StratoShark, you have these tools that operate the same and have the same sort of feature set. And so you can kind of share knowledge at the using this application level and maybe share tips back and forth and work more effectively that way. At least that's something that I hope will occur with StratoShark.
Now, you mentioned SharkFest, which is the annual Wireshark conference. You've got a SharkFest coming up in June. Do you want to give us a little teaser of what's going on at the event?
Sure. One of the big things that's going to happen this time around is that we're going to have a keynote by Vint Cerf. He spoke at the very first SharkFest, and I think he gave a keynote at one other SharkFest, but it's something I'm really excited about, the fact that he's going to be there and speaking.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the really cool things about our industry is that a lot of the pioneers are still here, and you can talk to them, and this is an opportunity to do that. And I love the fact that we can have people like Vint Cerf. A couple of years ago, we had Radio Perlman speak at SharkFest, and that was delightful. And Vince always, it's great a delight as well to see him talk. He just has so much knowledge to share, and I love the fact that we can get people like that, people who are just these pillars of our community, and get them in front of people who are just starting out and just learning, and or maybe at various different points in their careers, and just get them connected. And that's just one of the things I love about SharkFest.
Yeah, that's cool. Are there other things going on at SharkFest? Like, can I go there and get some training or learn how to use Wireshark? What happens? What else happens?
Sure. The basic format of the conference is that prior to the conference, we have pre-conference classes. So if you maybe are new to networking, you can go to the pre-conference classes and kind of build up a foundational knowledge base and be in a really good place to get the most out of the conference proper. And during the conference, we have different tracks. We have introductory tracks and intermediate and advanced tracks, and that focus on different areas of networking, whether it's just basic networking or security or what have you. One of the quotes I heard about SharkFest years ago was that it's one of the few conferences where speakers will go to see each other's talks, instead of just coming in and leaving. Because we do have a wide variety of stuff. I mean, I love the fact that we have these people that want to come in and share all this interesting stuff, and some of it's the same each year, which is great, but a lot of it's also different each year, which is also great. I love having that both stability and variety.
Well, Gerald, thank you for being here and giving us a little bit of insight on the Wireshark Foundation and how folks can get involved. For more information, go to wireshark.org, and also SharkFest, the Wireshark conference. It's June 14th through the 19th in Richmond, Virginia, here in the U.S. So this June 2025. Thank you again, Gerald, for being here. Thanks to you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find many more fine, free technical podcasts and our community blog, plus much, much more at packerpushers.net. Follow us on LinkedIn, hear us on Spotify, and rate us on Apple Podcasts. And last but not least, remember that too much networking would never be enough.